Oh, yeah, you
Looking at those.
All right, I'd like to call to order the Policy Subcommittee meeting. Roll call, please.
Member Dugan?
Present.
Member Magnolia?
Present.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the assignment of students to schools policy, and I think Kim Powers and Charlie Gallo are going to help us out with that. So.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I have the opposite issue. Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. Superintendent, members of the administration, mayor, committee members, Chairperson Dugan, and subcommittee member Magnolia. For the record, Charlie Gallo, Lynn Public Schools Compliance Officer, here with Kim Powers, Deputy Superintendent, to propose a replacement Lynn Public Schools assignment of students to schools policy. And Ms. Powers is going to start us off with just the focus areas that we went through in creating this draft.
Okay. Mr. Gallo and I are here to propose a change to our current student assignment to school policy. The concern with our current policy and practice was brought to light by our attendance supervisors, Kristen Freyer and Lauren Walsh, and as a result, the attendance team worked with Mr. Gallo to create the document and the proposed changes to the Lynn Public Schools assignment to schools policy. Of concern is the lack of calibration in our practices across the district. Our goal is to propose a new policy that is clear and explicit and looks to unify our practices so that there is clarity of rules for families, clarity of rules for our principals, and a unified approach and understanding to this topic that supports an equitable, fair, and reasonable response to every family and situation.
So what we're doing is rooting this first and foremost in the law, and so this is the applicable statute, and it provides that there's a right for students to attend school in the city or town they reside, and it provides that a school committee is not required, but hypothetically may enroll someone who does not reside in that town. So right of the student to go to school where you live, and availability of discretion to the school district to admit folks who do not live within the district. This is the compulsory attendance law. That is, every student needs to attend school in their own town or in another. And so these are the state laws that govern the various cities and towns and districts. And then when we go down to the local district level, it becomes a matter of local policy. And that's what we're here before you to talk about tonight. Deputy Superintendent Powers is going to take us through the existing policy, and you'll see that it's a difficult one to abide by.
Yeah. Our current policy states, no pupil shall be allowed to attend any school outside the prescribed boundaries within which the pupil lives, unless for cause satisfactory to the superintendent of schools and the school committee, or unless the number of pupils in any grade exceed the accommodations of the grade in his district, in which case the superintendent shall assign to adjoining districts enough pupils living nearest to those districts to relieve overflow. Any pupil attending a school outside of the district may, at the end of the school year, be assigned to a school in the district where he regularly belongs. In case of the removal of a pupil from one district to another within the school year, he shall not be compelled to change his school until the end of that year, provided his residence does not interfere with his regular and punctual attendance. For the most part, the current policy is not followed, and as a result, we have different schools behaving in different ways across the district. The audience for our new policy is LPS elementary middle school students who change residence from one elementary middle school district to another elementary middle school district within Lynn. These are Lynn students. Students in any grade who change residences from Lynn to another Massachusetts city or town. They now would be non-Lynn students. Students who change residences from Lynn to another state or country. The new policy will provide clarity and give guidance to all of the above scenarios. The policy being proposed will not impact any one of the following situations. Lynn students attending special education programming outside their area of residence. Lynn students who are homeless or in foster care. Voluntary desegregation. Lynn students participating in dual language. Disciplinary removal that has caused a change in placement.
So in coming up with a proposed new policy, we of course look to other districts to see what other districts were doing. And there are not a ton of districts that have as many middle and elementary schools within their city as Lynn does. But we look to a few: Newton, Lowell, and Worcester. And each of them has a pretty restrictive rule as to district lines. So Newton says that students are required to attend school in the attendance area in which they reside unless the superintendent grants special permission. So that means if you move from the Sisson district to the Aborn district, you change schools from the Sisson district to the Aborn district in Newton. There's no sort of grace unless the superintendent allows that grace for you to stay. Lowell says students who move from one geographic zone to the other in the city may request to remain in the school they are in until the end of the school year. So again, you change districts immediately unless you request special permission, and that permission can only extend through the end of that year. Worcester, when a student changes residence and would enter grades 6, 8, or 12, those transitional grades, he or she may finish the year in that school provided that he or she is a resident of Worcester and receives the out-of-district principal's permission to stay in that school. Again, finish the year, and the permission is from the principal. We looked to other districts as well in terms of what do they do when a student moves out of that city or town, and we liked what we saw in Danvers, actually. If a student leaves Danvers, during the school year, generally speaking, they're supposed to enroll in the district in which they move to, but there is some grace if the student moves in the final portion of the year, April, May, or June, and the superintendent can allow them to stay at that point. What we are proposing as a new policy is similar to the other policies we looked at, although I will say in all respects, the proposal that you have before you tonight has in it more grace and more leniency. And here's what we do. This is the policy document. If the move, the start of the policy document that's proposed tonight, if the move is within Lynn during the school year, you have the right to transfer immediately to the other district. So you move from Aborn to Sisson, you have the right to transfer to Sisson immediately. You also have the right to finish out that year at your existing school with no appeal. So you have the right to change immediately or finish out the year. That is some grace. And then if you want to finish additional years, you have a right to ask the superintendent for the ability to finish out additional years. If the move is within Lynn during the summer months between years, we say at that point, transfer immediately or ask for the right from the superintendent to stay. If you move to another city or town, transfer immediately unless you're in the months of April, May, or June, stealing from Danvers, some grace for that final portion of the year. If you move to another state or country, however, transfer immediately at that point. The considerations in the proposed policy in terms of continued attendance at your former home school or would-be former home school include attendance, good attendance. And if your attendance is not good, there's a provision that allows the principal of that school to ask the superintendent to move you. It's not going to be, there's some due process there. It's not principal sort of sends you out. It's principal requests superintendent to do so. And if there's an appeal to the superintendent to continue staying in your existing school beyond that 1 year, there are a number of grounds, but you can look, it's best interest of the student, best interest of the school, class sizes, really any non-discriminatory factors. So we're looking at the totality of the circumstances. As Deputy Superintendent Powers said, there has not been calibration of practices on this issue in the past, so we have a grandfather provision. If a student was told that they could stay at a school for a certain amount of time, they're grandfathered. We're not going to pull the rug out from under that student with this policy change. And then the final portion of the policy are some shared responsibility and obligations as to parents and students to notify schools if they move. And also, some due process rights for parents and students. If there is a investigation as to place of residency, that the family is given the right to know that that's occurring. It will not occur behind closed doors, and they have the due process right to present their own case, present evidence to the contrary. We are happy to take any questions. I do have on the screen for consideration of the subcommittee a proposed motion to advance this to the full committee with a recommendation to revoke the existing policy JECC and replace it with this policy, but renumber it as JCA, which would be the code consistent with the Mass Association of School Committees policy. I will say that Chairman Dugan and I have met with Dorothy Presser, your consultant on this, who is in agreement with everything that was proposed tonight. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Yes, Member Gately.
I have a quick question, because it came up this year to me from a parent. What happens if someone is attending Lynn Public Schools but does not live in Lynn because their parents work in Lynn? And how do we figure that out? Because the person didn't want to say anything about who, but they did want me to know, make me aware that this is happening and that we need to get a handle on it.
You want to take it, Kim?
So I don't know where in this policy it addresses that. I thought I saw it.
Sure. So this policy is more about the sort of assignment to school if you move, but it also includes at the end some provisions around looking into that issue. So you have two supervisors of attendance, Kristen Freyer and Lauren Walsh, and their team who are responsible for that issue. And what this policy does at the end of the policy is it provides a process for that issue to be looked at, for it to be investigated, for the parent to know that the investigation is occurring, and for the parent to be able to present evidence to the contrary if that allegation is not true. So it takes out of the dark what is should be an open and fair process, but should also result in students attending school where they reside.
Right, so the person that's concerned, they would call up the supervisor of attendance and start like an investigation.
You could do that, or you could do it through the school, and individual principals and the attendance office do get those calls from time to time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gailey.
You have a question here from the...
Yeah, sure, Dr. Magnolia.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I first want to give you kudos for changing the language in this policy to gender neutral from the aforementioned universal he. I think anytime we can clean up policies so that they are more inclusive, I applaud that effort. I also wanted to find out what happens, and I've encountered several students like this, actually through some of the work I've done volunteering with La Vida, who have a parent in one state and then another parent in Lynn. And they're using the parent in Lynn's address, so they do fall under this, but it's joint custody. How do we determine, where the appropriate residence is for the student to attend school? I had a student actually ask me this question. She was finishing out her year in English, and then she was going to have to go to school in New Hampshire. And so I was thinking if this policy helped us with sort of joint custody, that might, or if we could clarify something, that might help, but I don't even know if that could be written into the policy, so I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Place of residency is ultimately what the Massachusetts statute governs, and so to the extent that the student has residency in another state, they would have to attend in that other state. In situations of shared custody, it's typically stipulated that there would be residency with one parent or another for legal and custodial parents, and that's what we would look to. And we do pretty often have to, not uncommon that we do have to parse through sort of custody papers and divorce court cases and things like that to find out what residence is. That is something that's part of the day-to-day here.
Member Pena, go ahead, you next.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Gallo, for your presentation, and thank you, Kim. I had a question here. I think it's the third slide, when you said the new proposal. I kind of didn't get that. How is that going to affect when you talk homelessness or foster care or due to participation in dual program? Can you just go over that again, please?
Absolutely.
I think it was the third
Those
slide.
students could be living out of district, but
Yeah.
they are granted the right to still continue to attend their in-district school.
Okay.
That is their right to continue to do that.
So
You
that's
could have
not
a
the-
student placed out in Lowell who will return daily to go to Harrington School.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because once kids start in the dual program, I love the dual program. They have like the Compañero program in Harrington,
Yes.
stuff like that, so that was just my question, thank you.
And they'll be excluded from this attendance policy
Okay, yeah.
or assignment policy once you're enrolled in a specialized program like that,
Okay,
you stay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Member Magnolia.
Dr. Magnolia.
I would like to move to revoke existing policy JECC entitled Assignment of Students to Schools. Adopt proposed assignment of students to schools policy with the following changes, including renumbering the new policy as file JCA, consistent with the classification system used by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
Second that,
and move to the full committee?
and move to the full committee, yes.
And move to the full committee, sorry.
So that's second, so roll call, please.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that is that. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Powers and Attorney Gallo for your work on that. That was a great presentation. I appreciate that. And then next on the agenda for the subcommittee is the network, and email responsible use and device care policy for students and staff. And again, we're going to see Attorney Gallo, Jessica Beal, and Rachel Marcus, and Tim Roach for that presentation. Jessica, did I get your name right? I'm sorry.
Billy.
Billy, I'm sorry. Billy. Jessica Billy.
Big deal, though. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I've gotten worse.
Can I just request that anyone who's speaking, make sure you do it in the mic so that Member Magnolia can hear you.
All right. Good evening once again. For the record, Charlie Gallo, Lynn Public Schools Compliance Officer, and I'll ask my colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
I'm Jessica Billy. I am a resource inclusion teacher at Lincoln Thompson Elementary School.
Rachel Marcus, I'm an elementary math coach.
Tim Roach, I'm the network administrator here in the schools.
And tonight we have a proposed Lynn Public Schools Internet Network and Email Responsible Use and Device Care Policy for students. This governs students. And just a little bit of background, during COVID, laptops were handed out. We switched the way of learning, pivoted as that term was used and overused, and we did so necessarily putting the cart before the horse without policy. And now, as things are sort of normalizing, we're trying to catch up and put into place some policy to govern that. I want to first ask my colleague Tim Roach to talk a little bit about the working group that was put together to look at this policy issue. And I'm going to put the name of the folks who were part of that working group on the screen. And my hat is off and commend all of them for their good work on it.
Yeah, thank you. This slide just represents a wide range of names from the various LPS staff members. We had a committee based from teachers of all levels, administrators from special education department, ALE department, principals, central administration. So we feel we had a pretty fair group talking about this policy and trying to come up with something that suits all our families.
In terms of creating a draft version of this policy, that group that Mr. Roach referenced brainstormed about the use of technology in the Lynn Public Schools. What are the needs? What are the gaps? Where is policy needed? And again, to sound like a broken record unintentionally, we looked to other districts' policies. Salem, Massachusetts was one. Plainville, Massachusetts, which doesn't have a great deal in common with Lynn, but does have a really comprehensive and good, I would say, technology policy, was given to us by your consultant, Dorothy Presser from Massachusetts Association of School Committees. So we look to that quite a bit. In terms of then creating a draft, we use those other policies and we look to the feedback that the working group developed. We created one draft, we created another draft, and the working group chipped away over the summer months in coming up with the draft that is before you tonight. After the working group was done, we shared the draft with the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Ms. Presser, as Mr. Dugan is aware, had no substantive changes. She was happy with the policy. She did tighten up some of the language, which is much appreciated and much needed, if you know me, once in a while. The process then went to getting feedback on the draft, and we used a bilingual feedback tool, Spanish and English. We targeted parents and students because they weren't represented within the working group. The working group was comprehensive staff representation, but not parents and students. And so Superintendent Ruggiero sent it out to all 16,000 households, and we actually got over 200 responses. We also solicited input from students themselves through the student councils and inclusivity panels, and we got some good results based on that survey, and my colleagues are going to share those results with you now.
So the feedback tool first asked about the overall policy statement, which is that LPS network, email system, and devices may be used only for educational purposes related to Lynn Public Schools, and 96% of respondents agreed, which is.
And then it was asked about how the shared responsibility is conveyed, and 97%, which was almost total consensus, did agree on that, and we will get into later what shared responsibility we're defining.
Yeah, and we also feel that we got a pretty impressive 94% feedback regarding the progressive approach to having some shared responsibility if there are lost, stolen, damaged devices.
There were some open-ended questions, and about a quarter of respondents responded to the open-ended questions, and generally they were complimentary responses, saying that the draft was fair, it was well-written, it was understandable. In good faith, I'm going to present to you as well the negative responses, which were in each category less than 10%, in some cases less than 3% of respondents who had disagreements, but a minority of respondents did object generally to the use of technology in the Lynn Public Schools, that is, learning should be paper and pencil. A minority of respondents mentioned that they had concerns that the Lynn Public Schools oversees what the computers are used for, and that's not really an area we have discretion. There are 2 federal laws that are listed that say districts need to monitor use, so we don't have discretion in that area. And there's also just a couple of comments where parents, or in some cases students, felt that the laptop should be able to be used for their parents' work purposes, their parents' own educational purposes, for household functions like bill paying. And these represented a minority of responses, but in good faith, I wanted to represent those to you tonight. You have the full policy in your packet. I'm not going to go through it entirely, except to highlight with my colleagues a few sections. That is the overview section, the shared responsibility section, and the device loss or destruction consequences section. In terms of overview, it is that there is a right to access a device on the premises and a general permission to bring your device home for students who are grade 3 and above. with, as we'll see later on, the ability of the district to govern that right to bring home the device. That is when there are multiple broken, damaged, lost devices, that we begin to govern that taking home of the device. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to talk a little bit about the shared responsibility section of the proposed policy. Shared responsibility is one of the core values of the district, and so an important part of this policy.
So as we mentioned earlier, one of the questions on the feedback tool was about shared responsibility. The first thing we talked about on the committee were the core values, and we decided to emphasize the core value of shared responsibility as important when talking about technology. So individual schools, their part of this puzzle is to communicate expectations around the use of technology and the care of the device in an ongoing way. So really just putting out those expectations to students is our piece of the shared responsibility. And then students and families, their piece would be notifying the Lynn Public Schools IT department if the device is lost, misplaced, stolen, broken, damaged, destroyed, or not properly functioning in any way.
We also talked about how the Lynn Public Schools has installed a firewall, and it enables filtering to protect against any inappropriate content, but they are not absolute. And students and families should notify Lynn Public Schools IT department of any potential problems or issues encountered with their device and any potential security risks.
The draft also has an aspirational component asking families to reasonably supervise students when they're at home on their laptops. The device also asks for staff, if they notice, if they see potentially inappropriate action by students, to report it to their supervisor. There are a couple of cross-outs that you see on the slide that's on the screen here, and for collective bargaining agreements, for collective bargaining reasons, we are asking to strike a little bit of language that's in your proposed draft that puts a little bit more onus on staff. But what we're looking to do is ask reasonable supervision by parents and ask staff, if they see something, to say something. Students are also expected to take reasonable precautions for the safety of themselves and others, as a reminder in the policy. And then we get into the final part of the policy, which is device loss or destruction. So if a device is lost, misplaced, stolen, destroyed beyond repair other than normal wear and tear, and that is during a given replacement cycle, and the replacement cycle for devices is is it 3 or 4 years, Mr. Roach? 4 years, thank you. Every 4 years, that there's a progressive approach to the consequences on that, and the progressive approach could be no consequences. It could be restriction of the ability to take the device off school premises. It could be the requirement to participate in an educational opportunity. That is a lesson about device care. You know, it's probably going to be some kind of a taped video or something. And potentially, after multiple, within that 4-year period, issues potentially monetary reimbursement up to the cost of the device. There is a chart in your proposed policy that lays it out. The first instance, unless there's really maybe an educational opportunity required, depending on circumstances, and there's no monetary reimbursement required unless there was witness damage or destruction. You know, somebody throws a laptop down the hallway. There will remain permission in that first instance to take your second device off the premises. Then we get into second instance. This is not career of the student. This is second instance in that 4-year period. Second instance, maybe, depending on the circumstances, maybe not, will you be allowed to take your device off the premises. We may require reimbursement, we may require educational opportunity, or we may require neither. So it's really a discretionary at that second point. Third or more instance, at that point, we would restrict the ability to take the device off the premises, and we would require either reimbursement, the educational opportunity, or both in egregious circumstances. So we are again happy to take any questions, but I'll put on the screen for you a proposed motion if the committee wishes to advance to the full committee for consideration. It is to number this policy as IGNDB-S. S stands for students. And I would also say that if this motion is made, that for collective bargaining reasons, remove the following phrases from the shared responsibility section: by staff while in school, or by other staff, 2 phrases. And happy to take any questions, and thank you for your time.
Okay, Member Gately.
Just a quick question. If the device loss or destruction section, and they have to leave it in school, where do they leave it? Where is it stored? It's, they use it during school.
So,
explain that to me.
So I'll ask Mr. Roach if to speak to that.
Yeah, in that instance, the laptops would remain in the classrooms, although it would require a teacher to manage it, make sure it's there at the end of the day, give it to the student in the morning, but it would be held in school, in class.
And they'll have a place, they'll charge it right there?
That would be the proposed plan, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, and that should be there because, they're going to come in and they're going to want to use it. And
Agreed.
If it's not charged up, then they're going to cause havoc.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation.
I think I had Member Castellanos.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So I think what I'm going to ask is, it's around the device loss or destruction section. My first question is, how much is the reimbursement cost of the device? What's the estimate there? How much is it?
So the policy is discretionary, and we would look at the circumstances, whether the family, is able to reimburse. Could be one consideration, the circumstances around the loss, but the cap is the amount that the device is purchased for. And what I'll tell you is that the devices that went out in the first round were in the $200 some odd cost per device. The devices that are coming out in the second round now are in the over $500 per device range. I will tell you that in school year 2021-2022, there were a total of 3,218 damaged devices and a total of 637 lost devices. So we're talking close to 4,000 devices at that cost. And so this policy tries to prevent that and tries to provide some discretion on how to enforce the care of a device.
With that data, I think my focus really is the unintentional. I think that's the piece where I think there might be some equity issues there, because if what's the average time span our students are going to have these devices? Because if I'm looking at it correct, I know wear and tear doesn't count, but unintentionally, if someone spilled some, or if these kids have unsafe homes, I just kind of think I'm thinking a little bit outside the box, and that definitely does present a reality. So unintentional, I think that might. What was the thought?
So it would be within the committee's purview, certainly, to change that language, but I'll tell you what the thought of the working group is that there sometimes is unintentional neglect. And so the student who is under those circumstances, maybe moving from home to home, is probably not going to be asked to do the reimbursement piece, but the student maybe who leaves a device out in the hot sun 2 or 3 times probably is. That's not an intentional damage, but that's unintentional. So we're looking really to provide as much flexibility as we can, but also to be mindful that that there's not just intentional damage and loss. There's also carelessness to consider.
Well, I kind of think about the students who. When we first, when we were going through the pandemic and we were introduced to getting every student a device, some of these kids never had technology before. And that was something that, being responsible, that might have been the first responsibility with a device that cost that much. So that's kind of why that's my train of thought. And I do appreciate the thought and the working group. That takes a lot of work, it's why we're here. I did want to present that. When I saw it before, I kind of just want to talk to you about it.
Yeah, it was along those lines and progressive approach, so there's not going to be that, first instance that there's going to be a consequence that, we're going second and third instance that those kind of consequences would exist. But again, purview of the committee if you wanted to amend the language, but it was something that was discussed within the working group, certainly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Magnolia had some.
Dr. Magnolia.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the whole team who put a lot of work into this. I read it fairly carefully, but I could very well have missed it. Is there anything within this policy that puts the onus of responsibility, should Lynn Public School students be connecting to the network to do homework, etc., on their own devices, from releasing the Lynn Public School system from having to maintain or interact with those devices? And here's the example I want to give. We all have those friends who are only Apple all the time, okay? And those friends, while we love them dearly, get a laptop like this, don't know what to do with it, and then just figure out everything that's on it, put it onto an iPad for their kid, and have their kid do everything on the iPad. Now, I have encountered these parents myself, and they seem to think that when they can't access, I don't know, some Schoology thing, or they're doing a book it and they can't get in or whatnot, that it is somehow Lynn Public Schools' responsibility to be able to figure out why their iPad is not connecting in this way. So I want to make sure that Lynn is protected from my very lovable, but very headstrong about their Apple devices parents.
This policy does not put us on the hook for any of those things. There is some sort of liability protection at the bottom of page 3. It's around connecting devices to the Lynn Public Schools network, and that the Lynn Public Schools will not be held responsible for use of any information obtained that way, loss of data, and negligence, errors, omissions, service interruptions that occur as a result of that. So to Dr. Magnolia, I don't know if that covers the concern or if we would want to do some amended language there, but the bottom of page 3 most closely.
Where I was thinking, I was wondering if we wanted to add that last sentence in the first paragraph on page 3, where it says access to wireless network. If it should say, use of the wireless network is at the student's own risk, and then semicolon, use of a student's own device on the network is at the student's own risk. Something like that, that kind of delineates the device versus the network. I don't know if that's redundant, but I thought something like that might clarify this whole, it's your responsibility if indeed you are using your own device.
May I read that back, Dr. Magnolia, just to be sure I have your thoughts correct? So use of student's own network is at student's own risk. Use of student's own device is at student's risk. And that would be the new first sentence under access to wireless network?
No, I'll clarify
Thank
that.
you.
Okay, so access wireless network, page 3. The final sentence of that first paragraph currently reads, use of the wireless network is at the student's own risk. Okay? So rather than ending that sentence with period, I would put a semicolon, because I'm an English professor and I like semicolons, that then also says, use of student's own device on the wireless network is at the student's own risk.
Got it.
Charlie, yeah, you might want to, I think Tim.
I'm sorry, I don't have the...
I'm looking for that phrase somewhere, and I see the whole list. I don't see something that's like, if you bring your device and something happens on our wireless network, it's not our responsibility. That's what I was looking for, either in that bulleted list on page 2 or somewhere in the access to wireless network on page 3. So I thought maybe adding just that small phrase might cover us, but I am happy to defer to an expert if it's in here somewhere that I'm not seeing it.
So so I think we could be looking at page 4 of the actual policy, underneath access to wireless network.
Yeah, that's right.
So that second paragraph, I don't know if you guys are on the same page as me right now. The second paragraph could be what Member Magnolia is referring to. She might be seeing it in a
Eric,
different...
are you on page 3 or 4? Because that's on my page 3 of the draft.
It's on my page 3.
It could be in two places. Where I'm looking at it is page 4 of the
Yeah.
actual policy.
Yeah, right.
I have it on 3.
Yeah, on that second paragraph, it actually, it states that they may not connect their personally owned devices. So that is a policy that the district would not want in place.
It may not.
It would be not.
That avoids all.
It avoids all, yes.
So we don't allow personal devices on our wireless network. Like, students aren't allowed, or staff are not allowed to bring in a personal device. They must use an LPS device.
That clears it up for you, Dr. Magnolia, or?
Can you just direct me to where that is? Because I'm not seeing that. That doesn't mean it's not in here. I didn't see that.
Here. Thank you. So the bottom paragraph of 3, while on Lynn Public Schools premises, students may not connect district-issued devices to the student's own personal hotspot or similar technology. Is that what we mean? So that's connecting.
That to me says you can't connect an LPS laptop.
Right, it doesn't say there.
That's a hotspot. It doesn't say you can't bring your own device to the network. That's what I'm thinking of.
So, it was
Personal, was it?
It was about, yeah. So I think we could do then is add that as an amendment. So students are not to disrupt the use of the wireless network. Use of the wireless network is at a student's own risk, semicolon. Use of student's own device on the Lynn Public Schools wireless network is at student's own risk. I think could be an amendment to this.
But I want to make clear, though, because what
Would not be allowed.
Piero said is actually quite different. She said no one's allowed to.
That's correct.
Okay.
They're not allowed,
May
so
not
it should.
connect
I agree
district-issued
with
devices or, oh, no.
I don't see it on there. It
Right.
should be on there.
Use of student's own device
Is prohibited.
is prohibited.
Okay, and I am up for wherever you all think that belongs.
Mm-hmm.
It could go in that bulleted list that begins page 2, or it could go onto the access to the wireless network. And I will be happy to write up that phrase if you would like me to. I want to make sure that we don't have to come back to this policy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the only loophole I saw was what I like to call my lovable but obstinate Apple friends.
So Charlie, students and/or teachers?
Students, yeah. Well, this will be a student policy.
Student policy.
Yeah. All right. So we'll add a prohibition, so presuming there's a friendly amendment, we'll add a prohibition on students connecting their own devices to the district wireless network.
So are you going to add that, do you think that's a bullet under that list, that is the unacceptable uses?
I would say so.
Gallo, I'd be happy to hear any of your phrasing suggestions for a
Yeah.
bullet for that list.
And I think it could be left potentially discretionary to this group to come up with something that accomplishes that and places it appropriately within the policy so that we don't take up the, so we're not returning to the subcommittee unless you want us to.
Right, yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me. Is that okay with you, Member Magnolia?
Yeah, so I'm ready to move if there's no questions.
No, I don't know. There's, I'm sorry, Member Capola.
Okay. On the leaving the device at school.
Yeah.
Is there a cabinet in classrooms that is locked? And I would like to see the child be responsible for making sure that it's put away in a safe place, not the teacher's responsibility. So how will we do that?
So the policy is, so one of the things that the working group talked about was that this is the policy, but from this, there's going to have to be a second implementation. And so that'll be something that I think will be in sort of phase 2. How do we implement this and get into the specifics of who's going to store it, how is it going to be stored? but it's not, the policy doesn't go into that level of specificity.
Okay, if classrooms do not have, lockers that are locked, then, my suggestion is that the children, depending on how many in the school, have to go to the office. There must be locked cabinets in offices, and that's going to make them responsible for it. The other thing is, how would you do that on middle school kids and high school kids,
That's all sort of the post-policy implementation that we did talk about a little bit as part of the working group, but didn't settle on, of course, not knowing what was going to be passed tonight. But certainly, and the members who were part of that working group really, committed to, that if this policy were passed, figuring out those details. So I don't know if it makes sense to maybe include a motion with some suggestions on implementation that would not be policy, but suggestions, and I see the superintendent's hand as well.
Yeah, we would have to verify this, but I believe, and maybe even Mrs. Cohen could verify, I believe that they have loaner laptops at the schools, and that when a student is in need of a loaner, they sign, like, it's a sign out. They have to sign it out, and that it's brought back at the end of the day.
Day-to-day, yes.
Yeah, it's a day-to-day loaner of a laptop. We would have to verify that, but that's my understanding, is that there are carts that are loaner laptops that the schools have, and when a student is in need of a laptop, they have to sign out a laptop, and they bring it back at the end of the day.
Okay, but the student who has their laptop replaced, but has reached the rule where they cannot bring it home, they have their permanent one, they're not going to the loaner rack. They've got a permanent
Is it like a replacement that is theirs, Mr. Roach, or is it that it's replaced with a loaner?
With the progressive approach, it would be a replacement, unless it gets to a point where either, they cannot, an agreement can't be made. But I think with, they would get their own device. The loaners are separate. That's when a child forgets it, they come in. I think what you're referring to is when it gets replaced, there would be like Charlie said, there would be a plan if this motion gets passed. Phase 2 would be to purchase devices like that, the cabinets. We've already been looking into it, but once we determine that policy would hold, we would then go ahead forward.
Could the policy be that they're with the loaners? And is that a locked cabinet?
It is a locked cabinet. It could be, but the loaner cabinet is already full. So, the loaner cabinet would be full. There would be additional. And of course, you're running into space issues, but that would have to be the process.
I think you should, I don't know why I don't see any name on here that I associate with, one of the union offices, but maybe that should be another thing that you look at as you sit down.
So I've taken notes on those suggestions, Ms. Capola, so that when the implementation piece happens, we'll be sure to address those. Yeah.
Member Magnolia. Okay, Member Magnolia.
So I would like to, excuse me, I would like to move to adopt proposed internet, network, and email responsible use and device care policy for students, filing it under IJNDB-S with the following changes. Language strikes as indicated earlier. I'm sorry, I couldn't catch them. And the addition of a policy about accessing the network on a personal device.
Okay, move to the full committee.
And move to the full committee.
All right, second. Roll call, please.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
So yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for all your stellar work here. I know that it started late June, early July, I think, when we
You know, time flies when you're having
Yeah,
fun, but it
yeah.
was a summer project.
Yeah. This has been quite a while, so I appreciate all your hard work and,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Charlie?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah.
Yes, roll call, please.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
All right, the policy subcommittee.
Great, so we'll run into open mic. The open mic session is designed to provide an opportunity for citizens to express their views on matters of concern to the school committee. The sessions are not designed to encourage debate or lengthy exchange of views, but are to have the committee understand numerous points of view. The committee would appreciate speakers keeping their presentation to 3 minutes in order to accommodate as many people as time permits. The chair reserves the right to limit the number of speakers on the same topic to 3. All speakers must be at least 18 years of age or enrolled in high school in the Lynn Public Schools District and having discussed their views with a student government representative. The chair reserves the right to rule the speaker out of order if he or she feels that the speaker's comments are personal in nature. The speaker's comments are directed at a school committee member or a member of school administration in attendance. That member, through the chair, may address the individual. The session will promptly commence 15 minutes prior to the start of the regular school committee meeting. First sign up is Sheila O'Neill. If you could state your name and address, please.
Sheila O'Neill, President of the Lynn Teachers Union, 200 Locust Street, Lynn. First, I'll make one comment on the policy for technology. The question that was asked was about storage of a unit that's not allowed to leave the building. Teachers will not be responsible for that. You cannot just leave it in a classroom. Those classrooms have custodians that work after hours. We would have no control over the safety of that device. Therefore, teachers will not be responsible for it. Thank you. So my second point for today is to bring to the members of the school committee's attention the morale at this point, 6 weeks into the school year. I've had countless emails, phone calls, text messages, complaints of feelings of being overwhelmed, and the district, the lack of supports and things that are not been done in a timely manner due to all the delays. And they were flexible, and they've been flexible, but like they're at the breaking point. And I received this one letter that I would like to read. So, since 2020, teachers have adapted their teaching and everything they know to meet the needs of their students in ever-changing environment. COVID-19 came and teachers became experts at online teaching, Zoom. And then as some of the students returned in April of 21, we became experts at hybrid learning. We taught students in person simultaneously with students online and did it without complaint. The 21-22 school year was not without its challenges. Coming off a pandemic, many classrooms had upward of 29 students. Some of these students had never entered a classroom before, and all those that did had had a half day of learning. In kindergarten, at our classroom before, and all those that did have at our school, they had a maximum of 13 students in their room during the 21-22 school year, with 2 educators for 2.5 hours. Now they were in first grade with 1 educator, a class size doubled from what they were accustomed to, and are asked to accelerate, not remediate their learning. To say that the school year was a challenge would be a gross understatement, but we endured. We succeeded. As the year came to an end, we finally heard welcome news. A change to the curriculum was coming. Gone were the days of reach and following a program to fidelity. Now we were finally going to be able to teach the way we have wanted, with cohesive units, English language arts supporting science, supporting social studies, and including social justice standards. Many of us worked tirelessly over the summer to create these units with our grade level peers in anticipation of a successful school year. We then found out we would have another new curriculum, illustrative math. We all went into the training during the summer with open minds. We wanted a change from Go Math. Lo and behold, it is another scripted program with another twist. We were told there were no supports for our special education population, and the recommendation was to pull our students for special education instruction. We know that this is not the best practice. All students deserve to be taught in the classroom with the supports they need. We were promised all the materials on time and to be prepared for lessons, our workload in the fall. Everyone wanted to help make the 22-23 school year the best and most normal we had had in years. The center kits came 4 weeks late and are not organized. The copies we were told would be made are nowhere to be found. Lessons take upwards of 45 minutes to prep. Teachers also logged in once it was up and running onto Power Schools to see our rosters. As we all know, educators come in unpaid the week or two before school starts to set up our rooms to make it welcoming and friendly for our students. Students are still not rostered on our math program online. We label things, organize. Unfortunately, with Power Schools not actually up and running, we were unable to see our rosters. We did not know who would be entering our room on September 7th. Once again, we were asked to roll with the punches, and we did. As September approached, we waited to find out the missing piece, phonics. We found out late in the summer that we would be using Letterland. We then found out that our training would be the day before students came in our room. One day, a 6-hour training on arguably the most important part of learning in the early elementary grades. Not all of our questions were answered, and due to issues beyond educators' control, we needed to supply our personal emails for a trial of Letterland. Once again, we took it in stride. On September 7th, our students came in. We all
Reminder
smiled.
about the time, just.
I would ask for your wish to finish this letter.
Yep.
Thank you. We all smiled and welcomed them to a school year not separated by plexiglass or the need to be taught from 6 feet apart. We smiled as we got to know them, their likes, dislikes, strengths, weaknesses, and they got to know us. Our reason for teaching walked through the doors, and we thought we were ready. As time came to teach Unit A for Letterland, we realized none of the materials were available to us. As first grade teachers, we needed to access the kindergarten curriculum to download, print, and copy the activities we needed. Although we asked at the training if these materials were available, and we were assured they were. Then as we went through our materials, we realized we have one of each decodable book, which is not helpful with small groups of 6 to 8 students in a group. Before our 30-day trial was over, I reached out to see what we should do when our trial runs out, and was told to create another trial account due to the Letterland not being compatible with ClassLink. No one reached out to share this information. I had to ask. So, as you can see, the planning has not been there. I'm going to jump down due to the time and out of consideration. It says, although this letter is mainly focused on the struggles this rollout has had on teachers, the impact this is having on students is unacceptable. Students have not had a stable, consistent education since before the pandemic. Although a lot of this is out of the control of educators and the administration, some of it is and should have been thought out and planned better for the sake of our students. Principals and program specialists are doing all they can to support their staff and students. The problems are beyond their control. They are coming from the district level. Lynn educators have gone above and beyond for their students and families for the 19 years I have been teaching. Every year, more and more is asked for us, and we comply. We meet the demands because we want what is best for our students. But now, this year, I've had enough. I am trying to teach 25 students in front of me with 3 brand-new, incomplete curriculums, 2 of which are supposed to be taught to fidelity, and the other we are largely left on our own to figure out. For the first time in my career, I am embarrassed by the Lynn Public Schools and feel extremely disrespected. No one has reached out to apologize or explain what is happening or why. Acknowledgement, apologies, and explanations would go a long way. Teachers have left our profession in droves, and with the way this school year is rolling out, I see more leaving. I also heard from secondary teachers as well with the problems with Power School and uploading all individual classes. They are burnt out, and we're 6 weeks in. It is a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak at open mic? Anyone for open mic? Anyone else wishing to speak at open mic? we will close open mic. You want to take a couple minutes? Yeah, okay.
Fun time. A good group of people there. The Hall of Fame hasn't been like that for English in a while.
Yeah, yeah.
The last one wasn't like that.
You see the pile and he'll bust out of it. It's amazing.
It's fun to watch. That's how I'm imagining they run.
like to call to order the 15th regular meeting of the school committee. Roll call, please.
Member Castellanos?
Present.
Member Capola?
Present.
Member Dugan?
Present.
Member Gately?
Present.
Member Magnolia?
Present.
Member Pena?
Present.
Mayor Nicholson?
Present. Please rise for a salute to the flag.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item are the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 10th special meeting on September 14, 2022. The Building and Ground Subcommittee meeting on September 29, 2022. Personnel Subcommittee on September 29, 2022. Policy Subcommittee on September 29, 2022. And the 14th regular meeting on September 29, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's have it. Next item is clinical model presentation from Kim Powers.
All right, very excited to present to you the framework of student support model, something I was a major contributor to.
Kim,
The work,
You're supposed to have a moment's silence.
there's no one listed.
the work began in January of 2020 to establish the clinical model that we have today. We grounded our work in our district core values, placed equity front and center in all of our planning and decision-making, and looked to envision a future where we had the capacity to service all students. The work, we really worked hard to make sure that the model being created was driven by an equity lens and grounded in the district core values of inclusivity, shared responsibility, collaborative relationships, high expectations, and inspiring lifelong learning. The guiding question for us in this work was, is the student support model and the identified job roles and responsibilities being proposed guided by an equity lens and incorporate the district core values? The work was focused on two big ideas: developing a comprehensive model of student support with an equity lens, and defining the job roles and responsibilities that were equitable for both the social worker, now the clinician, and the SAC, now the clinical supervisor. The guiding question that drove our work is the student support model and the identified job roles and responsibilities being proposed guided by an equity lens, and does it incorporate the district core values? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Strengths of the model. We want to shout out what is believed to be the strengths of the model. There is a 1 to 250 student to clinician ratio. This is unheard of and recommended as a coveted ratio. Interestingly enough, on Channel 5 yesterday morning, they had a report. Did you see it?
I did.
There was a report out across the state on what the ratios were. I mean, most districts across the state are not quite, but nearly double that ratio, student to clinician ratio. So this is something we should be really proud of. The model increased the SEL department by almost 400%. There is a building-based clinical supervisor for supervision and evaluation on site. The model created opportunity and capacity for leadership and professional growth, especially for social workers. The model addresses a long-standing equity issue with respect to job roles, responsibility, and compensation. And most importantly, this model makes available SEL supports for all students. This slide outlines the primary roles and responsibilities of the clinician: providing support to all students and families, providing counseling services to students with disabilities as part of their IEP in 504, both crisis intervention and behavioral support, family engagement and outreach. Clinicians are integral members of the wellness team and primary supports for our attendance initiative. They support both the culture and climate within our schools, and they serve a primary role in information and referral for community resources. The next slide is about the primary roles and responsibilities of the clinical supervisor. They continue to provide direct service, but carry a smaller caseload. They provide clinical supervision differentiated for licensure. They do the evaluation, carry out the evaluation process for clinicians per the CISP rubric. That means Specialized Instructional Support Personnel. They coordinate all school clinical meetings. They provide emergency support and crisis intervention, and they lead and support implementation of specialized education requirements. In this school year, we had 4 schools who fully implemented the model. Our pilot schools are Breed, Ingalls, Harrington, and Classical. What this slide does is outline what that means by pilot versus non-pilot schools. In both the pilot and the non-pilot schools, the same structures exist. There is an increase in clinical support in all schools for all students. Clinical supervision and evaluation are done by the clinical supervisor in all schools. The big difference between the pilot and the non-pilot schools is in the special education compliance paperwork. In the non-pilot schools, the clinical supervisor still holds full responsibility, whereas clinicians in the pilot schools have been fully trained on this new responsibility in those 4 schools that I outlined. PD for all clinicians will be year-long, and full implementation of the model will begin in the next school year. Here you can see the configuration or assignment of clinicians and clinical supervisors across LPS based on size and student enrollment. We have a total of 68 school-based clinicians and 25 clinical supervisors for a total clinical school-based team of 93 clinicians across LPS. The asterisks just highlight that we still have 3 clinicians to hire and 2 clinical supervisors. The following is an outline of the professional development presented at the beginning of the school year for all clinical supervisors and clinicians in the pilot schools. Easy IEP, because one of the things you need to remember is that many of our clinicians did not service students on IEPs. That was the role of the school adjustment counselor in our old model. Easy IEP, IEP goals, present levels and accommodations, behavior intervention action plans, 504, the attendance initiative. Now also for our clinical supervisors, supervision and evaluation is a brand new role, so there was a focus on clinical supervision in that opening PD for them, educator evaluation, and crisis protocol. What you see here on the next slide is the professional development plan for all clinicians this school year. 2 big ideas that I just emphasized but want to re-emphasize, that is some of this PD is especially focused on the new or changing job responsibilities of clinicians and clinical supervisors. For clinical supervisors, this will be supervision and evaluation. And for clinicians, compliance responsibilities connected to the IEP and 504 process. I want to thank you all. I'm really excited about this clinical model. In touch points with principals across the district in the opening of the school year, the level of clinical support is much appreciated.
Member Dugan.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I'm really excited about all this. As you said, it was on just the news this morning, or yesterday morning, this morning.
Yeah.
Across the state, so that was great, and great to see. So my question is, how do families or students access this, or how do we identify the students that may need the supports that we're outlining here?
So students can be identified to see a clinician by a number of ways. It could be through a teacher referral, a principal, or a program specialist referral, but also through our wellness teams is another mechanism. Obviously, students on IEPs, it's through the IEP process.
Right. Thank you.
Member Capola, Member Castellanos.
I was just looking at the chart with the schools and the breakdown.
Sure.
And the Hood School seems to still need 3 and 2 clinical supervisors. Is there any reason why, am I reading that wrong?
Hood needs 1.
Hood School.
Unless that's the stars for the other thing.
No, that's just telling you know what, when the chart was made, it's just put in that block that we need to hire 3 clinicians, and so Hood School has 1 clinician and 1 clinical supervisor. They are at full capacity. The schools that are asterisked are the schools that Callahan, Druitt's, and Shoemaker are in need of clinicians.
Okay, thank you.
Member Castellanos.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for all the work that you guys put into this over the last, I think, since I've been on the committee, 5 years. I remember this in its infant stages.
Yeah.
When I remember there was a project, a class did at Marshall Middle School that highlighted the ratio issue. And I remember this. I remember seeing the students deliver that presentation, and then to see where we're at today, it's inspiring. I applaud everyone that's been part of it, and I do appreciate the menu, the professional development menu of opportunities there, because you hit the focus for me right now was that transition component in terms of all the new staff, because you have all these new changes, and it's important to support them. As we get more numbers and we start to increase that capacity, we want to make sure that we're it's overwhelming. This work is very overwhelming, especially when you start to see IEPs and 504s and compliant hooks that really create a burden that could really lead our staff to being burnt out, as we heard tonight. We're coming back from a pandemic, and there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm just grateful that we set ourselves up to be in that position, to be recognized on the news yesterday. I'm just really grateful, and thank you.
Well, we should be very proud of that ratio.
Yeah.
We have that in Lynn. I think probably we have one of the largest clinical forces in a school across Massachusetts.
It's the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to attack here. So.
Member Gailey.
Kim, I'm sorry, what's SISP stand for again? The acronym?
Specialized, I got to go back to that slide.
It's the rubric from the Department of Education specifically for therapists, for specialized positions.
Specialized support instructional personnel. So people on the CISP rubric would be like your clinicians, it would be
therapists.
All the therapists are on the CISP rubric. It's different from the teacher rubric.
Right.
Because they have a very different function.
I just like to see what it means, the acronym, and then I know and I'll remember it. So, but anyways, I did not see that on the news, that ratio. And I know that we have been working hard on this, and social emotional learners was very important and just beginning when the mayor and I went to a workshop. And to see the growth in this area is phenomenal. So I'm very, very pleased with this. I'm a little concerned about this, the teachers, it bothers me, but I'm glad about this. At least this could help them and support them so that things can get better for the teachers. Thank you, this was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Powers. I think, just echoing the members, this is an exciting moment to see this model implemented. I know it's just been years and years of prioritizing, addressing social emotional needs, thinking through how to do it, pushing for the resources to be able to make these hires, and it's really astounding that we've been able to reach that ratio, the target ratio. It took a lot of work and thought for the administrators, from obviously the practitioners, from the unions thinking through the model. So really grateful for all the collaboration to make it work. And this I think continues to be a priority for the community, the city as a whole, addressing social emotional needs, and particularly the mental health, behavioral health needs that are aggravated by the pandemic. And I think as we move forward as a community, as a city, addressing that for the community at large, I think that the school has an opportunity to play a real leadership role in addressing these needs with our youth, and really grateful for the force that's been put together on this. So, yeah. Next item is a request to accept a donation of $20,000 from the Teacher Collaborative for year 1 of participation in the Essex County Learning Community Professional Development. It's a recommendation of the superintendent.
I so recommend. This is a great opportunity for our staff to get to participate in additional professional development with other districts. So I do recommend this donation.
Will of the committee?
So move. Motion, want me to repeat it?
I think so. Moved.
To accept a request to accept a donation of $20,000 from the Teacher Collaborative for 1 year participating in the Essex County Learning Community Professional Development.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Castellanos?
Yes.
Member Capola?
Yes.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Gately?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
Member Pena?
Yes.
Mayor Nicholson?
Yes. Next item, Member Dugan, ratification of any votes taken in Policy Subcommittee.
Yeah, so we had 2 votes that we proposed to come to the full committee. The first of which is the motion to revoke the existing policy JECC, which is entitled Assignment Students to Schools, and adopt the proposed assignment of students to schools policy with the following changes. It would be to renumber the new policy as File JCA, consistent with the classification system used by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. So that was our first one.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Castellanos?
Yes.
Member Capola?
Yes.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Gately?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
Member Pena?
Yes.
Mayor Nicholson?
Yes.
Okay, and our second was the technology proposal. So the motion is to adopt the proposed internet, network, and email responsible use and device care policy for students. And then remove the following phrases from shared responsibility section. Those phrases are by staff while in school or by other staff. And under the unacceptable use, add use of outside devices on LPS wireless network as an unacceptable use.
We'll get it seconded on the table, and then I'll take the question. So was that a second, Member Pena?
Second.
Okay. Member Gately?
I just want to make sure that in the policy, this storage issue is addressed. So that has to be put in there, because that was brought up and it should be addressed. That's what we were questioning, storage for the laptops if a student can't take them home because of behavior or whatever. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. It's a great question. We could decide as a committee that the policy is that they leave them there, and then how that works is like there's a protocol that
It would be more of a systems side of it. It's not necessarily the policy, but the system that supports the policy. And as Mr. Gallo had said in his presentation, the next step is to create those systems and make sure that, we 100% agree, they need to be protected. We want them locked up.
I just want to make sure it's addressed, so that's why I brought it
Absolutely.
up again, because I don't want it just to be forgotten.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
I think it's also, the storage issue is not being responsible for the teachers, I think, and that's all.
Absolutely.
Will be part of it, right?
I had Member Pena and then Member Castellanos.
Yeah, we're just going to mention that Mr. Tim Roach, I think that was his name, he mentioned that would be the second phase once we get this policy in effect, so I think they covered that.
Member Castellanos?
Yeah, and then we have.
Okay, and then Member Magnolia. Yep. No, you're good. All right, Member Magnolia.
I want to remind the committee as of the whole that when it comes to policy matters, it's almost always in our best interest to keep the policies consistent across the elementary, middle school, and high school level, and then deal with implementation things, not in the policy, but other ways. So when it comes to something like storage, that is way too detailed for the specific school, for the specific level. So something that's detailed like that does not belong in a policy. It belongs in a procedure or a handbook or a manual for the individual school. So even though I take Member Gately's point about not wanting to get lost, it's erroneous to think that it belongs in a policy in order to make sure it doesn't get lost. One of the MASC training points that a number of us just went through is to make sure that your policies kind of are as sparse as possible and then deal with implementation strategies in other places. I think maybe it was not always the role of the committee in the past to separate out those two things, and I want to make sure this current iteration of the policy subcommittee does separate out those things as we do our work.
Thank you. Member Castellanos.
Just to clarify, we had Dorothy Presser with us during this process too as well, to guide us with the working group, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Member
Dorothy, Mr. Gallo, and I all met prior to this, and yeah, she's fully on board with everything we've.
Great, so we have a motion made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Castellanos?
Yes.
Member Capola?
Yes.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Gately?
Yes.
Member Magnolia?
Yes.
Member Pena?
Yes.
Mayor Nicholson?
Yes. Turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. In acknowledgement of Indigenous People Day, I chose a quote from a member of the Teton Sioux tribe. I've seen that in any great undertaking, it is not enough for a man to depend simply upon himself. This quote speaks to the importance of working together for a common purpose rather than in silos on our own. As we pass through the mid-fall mark, we think about the patience, resilience, and tenacity of our staff. Every school and department have stepped up around our focus this year to align the foci, resources, and supports in order to build a cohesive practice of building our toolkit for supporting ELs and students with disabilities. Together, we build community and reach our goals. I'd like to provide an update on the MSBA Pickering project. The designer selection panel proposal review was held on September 13th, 2022. After review and discussion by members of the designer selection panel, they voted 11-1 in favor of Raymond Design Associates, RDA. At the school building committee meeting yesterday, October 12th, Raymond Design Associates presented a plan and timeline for the next steps in the process. We will be planning a kickoff meeting in the next couple of weeks for the administration in preparation to begin the development of the educational plan and the start of visioning workshops in order to get the project team, administrators, staff, and community members' input. These meetings will be held virtually via Zoom in the evenings over a series of Wednesdays in November. More details will be forthcoming on these meetings. Finally, there is much to celebrate within the LPS community. This month, we began our alignment work with school-based administrators, teacher leaders through professional learning with Lynch Leadership Micro Academies, district PLC sessions, and soon we'll begin our work, our book talk using the book And Justice for Els with author Ayanna Cooper. This work together is building our capacity as educators and aligning our work from the district level to the school level and into our classrooms. We have received much positive feedback on this work and look forward to continuing this work together. We are proud to announce that we had 6 of our educators acknowledged for great work they're doing in Lynn and in their educational work. Miriam Rodriguez-Fusco and Kenwy Valdez were recognized at the State House and awarded the 2022 Exceptional Latino Educator Award. Dr. Christina Colella, who is being acknowledged at the Boys and Girls Club Gala at Danversport Country Club, she will be receiving the Commitment to Youth Award. Rania Caldwell, Amanda Campbell, and Jackie Gallo have been chosen out of thousands of presentation proposal entries to present Lynn's pre-K to 2 interdisciplinary units at the National Association of Bilingual Education, NABE, their annual conference in February in Portland, Oregon. On Monday, October 17th, beginning at 10 a.m., there is a special event being held at North Shore Community College. The Spotlight on Early College, a special event to celebrate growth and innovation in the Commonwealth, is an opportunity for all of us to hear the features and impact of the early college program for our students and families, and the commitment to this work as a community. I hope you will be able to join us at this event. I will send the detailed information to the committee as a whole. It should be a very exciting event on Monday, and I hope you'll be able to join us.
Great. Thank you. Superintendent.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Tiffany.
Thank you, everyone.
This year's been different. Everybody's counting me, they've been counting
Feel
me out.
better.
People underestimate. I'm taking to the time frame.
And this, and I